Well, welcome all. I think, thank you, Michelle, for kind of us out here. I just would like to call tonight's Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Advisory Committee meeting to order. Checking, are you able to hear me adequately?
It's really quiet,
Yes.
Ashley.
Okay, well, again.
Would you like me to call roll?
Please do.
Lee,
Present.
Sabula, Lyra,
Present.
Scott,
Present.
Roberts,
Present.
Price, Yang,
Present.
Johnson,
Present.
Hess, and you're present.
We can't hear you, Ashley.
I wonder if while Ash is working on that, does somebody else want to do the land acknowledgement? I believe we all received it.
I can do the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Angie.
We are gathered here on the lands that were originally home to the Menominee and Ho-Chunk nations. We honor the Menominee and Ho-Chunk communities and are grateful for their stewardship of the land and waters. We acknowledge these ancestral grounds as sacred and remember the complex history of settler colonialism on these lands and the effects that persist today. We commit to a restorative and healing relationship of the original inhabitants and our community.
Okay, thanks, Angie. Any luck, Ashley? Okay, looks like he's still concentrating. I can indicate that we have no citizens registered to make statements, nor do we have any public comments. Anyone registered to make public comment? So, Ashley, any luck?
I'm unregistered, but while Ashley is working on his microphone, I could just share with the group that I'm a new grandpa again. It happened last night. My son Nick and my daughter-in-law Fua, who live in Hudson, had a little boy, 8 pounds 7 ounces, and his name is Felix Keege. Fua is Hmong, so they name all their children. They have a Hmong name for their middle name, which means, I guess, talented. So, which is understandable. Hey, you know. So I'm pretty proud. So I have 4 boys, 4 girls now. So it's pretty exciting.
Clearly the mother's side of the family.
Well said. I'm glad you did that. So
Congrats, Fitz.
thank you. Thanks.
While Ashley continues to work on his microphone, maybe I'll just go to, the next item on the agenda is the discussion regarding the city manager roll-offs, DEI goal update, and approval of the city of Oshkosh diversity, equity, and inclusion performance measures. And I believe that John was primarily going to talk about those. So why don't we just go right into that?
Right. No, I'd be happy to. And Mark is with us tonight too. So thanks for attending, Mark, and he can fill in anything that I miss. But hopefully you had a chance to read the memo. Mark wanted me to share it with the group before he forwarded it on to council. And it really just chronicles, what we've done so far in regard to DEI, which was one of Mark's goals this past year. And then, talks a little bit about what we have planned for the future. So just to kind of recap the memo a little bit, we worked with a consultant, FEI, initially to develop a survey. And I believe that was, back in December of 2020. And from that survey, we took a look at the responses and thought that the first place to start was just to provide some training for our department heads and managers, so we could just be speaking at a common level, speaking a common language, and then trying to determine how to move forward, based on that. So we had some training, and we focused on implicit bias, microaggressions, civility in the workplace, and the history of DEI, just as a starting point for everyone. And I thought the training went really well. Michelle was there, Mark was there, other department and division managers were there, and it was really a two-day event. The first day was primarily focused on training. The second day was really designed for us to have dialogue about what we're doing, how we're doing it. Now that we've received some training at a very basic level, what sorts of things can we do? How can we help our employees get to a level where we can just have meaningful dialogue with each other about a variety of issues? And I was really proud of the managers that were there. I think they were really very supportive. They understand how important this is. Of course, Mark has conveyed to them how important it is, but I think they really embraced it. And we talked about some of the things that are ongoing in departments already, some of the initiatives, more action item oriented things. And we chronicled those, and from those, we kind of went through a planning activity where we took a look at how we could focus some goals, and then ultimately get to some measures, which of course we wanted to bring to DEI for your assessment and hopeful approval. So we worked on those things, and we took a look at how we could, what sort of structure would we need to not only just, they wanted to go beyond just developing measures and bringing them to you. They wanted to take responsibility for ongoing structure, ongoing dialogue, ongoing improvement. So we took a look at the ideas that were brought forward, kind of the common thoughts, the common themes. One of the things that was important right away was to continue education for employees, the same sort of education that we had received. And then, as I mentioned, having a structure where our employees could be engaged, they could be involved, they could also communicate with each other about how important these issues are and what we're doing. So we took a look at a structure that was developed by an organization called the Center for Global Inclusion. I don't know if you had an opportunity to take a look at the source document that I believe Michelle and Heather put out on the Google Drive. But I think it's a pretty impressive document. It's, I think I have it here. My office is a little bit more cleaned up than it has been lately when I was working on some of these things, but this is just a printout of that PDF that we put on the Google Drive, and it just talks about it's a framework for organizations, all kinds of organizations, not just governmental organizations, but private sector, public sector, to take a look at where they're at and assess, what they're doing in really 15 categories, and then how they can improve. And not everything applies to us because, we're a government public sector organization. but I think it's a really good framework. And so our management team thought that this was an important structural thing that we could use as a reference document going forward, taking a look at those 15 kind of dimensions and then assessing where we are and then where we would like to be and how could we get there. So that was an important thing that we focused on. We also talked about, as part of the suggestion, in addition to creating a framework, having an employee committee to help us move forward. We also talked about the idea that you also did with having some additional guidance and support. And we were a little bit familiar with Alonzo based on some of the interactions that he's had. He's spoken at some of our with some of the professional organizations that our department heads belong to. And, you know, when we had heard that, you know, you were considering him to help you with your plan, it was something that, you know, we were pretty excited about too. So our idea is that we would, you know, have our employee committee working through the framework, working with Alonzo, just as you're going to be working with Alonzo on your plan. And then ultimately, you know, bring these groups from an idea perspective together so we can work on things that may be better suited for one or the other. You know, I know your charge is primarily external. Our stuff is primarily internal, but we affect the external. So we're hoping, and, you know, Alonzo came back after the first time we met him, which was a good sign, that, you know, he's willing to help our two groups, you know, work together to try to make our community and our organization better. So that was really the background. Sorry for the long dialogue, but I wanted to just kind of be thorough. And then, and as a result of that, we tried to come up with metrics that would cut across all dimensions of diversity, equity, and inclusion. DARE is a resource we have, and it's a great one, but it's focused primarily on race. So we wanted to try to come up with measures that would focus on not only race, but also gender and sex, accessibility, and income. So those were kind of the thought processes that took place and the dialogue that took place when we came up with these measures. And some of them we already have in place. Some of them we're going to have to create. And interrupt me at any time. I don't mean to drone on because I can do that. Carmen, go ahead.
Are we adding age to that?
I don't have age listed as a separate measure, but that's certainly something we could consider.
For our workforce, we have the capability of doing exactly that.
Absolutely, yes.
Really?
So the measures we have are in the memo, and they're a percentage of permanent employees of color, ages 18 and above. And the reason we do that is we don't have a lot of employees that we hire that are younger than 18. So we just tried to make it something that could be comparable to our city of Oshkosh, the population. So that's one. Another one would be percentage of permanent employees by gender. And both these, of course, are self-reported, would be self-reported in terms of the demographics. And then the third one that we thought was important that we're already involved in is the Municipal Equality Index. And I think it's a really good external tool. It's a tool that we're evaluated by an external group, and there's a variety of conditions that are evaluated. There are other cities that are also evaluated. I'm pretty proud to say that, you know, when we first started being measured, I think our score was probably, help me, Michelle, like 35 or something. 23. And I don't know, how long ago was it?
4 years ago, I would say.
4 years ago. So in that short time, I think we're up to 76. Is that right?
75.
75. So it's something that I'm pretty proud of. I think that we have a long way to go, of course, but I think we're making progress in that dimension.
John, this is Beth. I have 3 questions for you.
Yes.
One of them is, who provided the training, the 2-day training?
The training was provided by FEI, and the trainer was Raquel. You met her early on.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, and then secondly, is the training for the rest of the employees going to be required?
Yes, it is required. And we're in the process of finalizing that training. We had all of the training provided in that one day for all of us, but in order to try to reach as many people as we can, we're breaking that training out a little bit. And Michelle, can you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Obviously, in order to train all of our employees on some of the concepts that we were trained on, it's been going over a few months. We started, I believe, September through November, and now we're working on makeup sessions and people that we were just unable to schedule due to their schedules, i.e., difficult schedules like third shift employees. So we're still working on a few groups, but the vast majority of our employees have been through our initial training now.
Thank you. My last question right now is, did you mention sexual orientation too in terms of what you're looking at?
Yes, gender and sex. And I think it's really more than sexual orientation. It's really a person's sexuality. So I didn't want to limit us to just sexual orientation.
Well, the word sex is pretty broad. So just
right, and we wanted it to be a little broad too.
Okay, thanks.
Because we wanted to have dialogue about all those things. I received some training recently from UW Oshkosh from their LGBTQ center, and I thought it was really excellent. They just went through a variety of basic concepts in addition to sexual orientation, just sexual identity, all kinds of different things. So we wanted to, as I spoke about earlier, introducing concepts, I think, to some folks that may not have had the opportunity to have dialogue about, we wanted to have that opportunity to do that.
And I think that's why we use the MEI measure, because that has a broad range of LGBTQ evaluation criteria. The points are, 100 is a perfect score. And there's a variety of things some that we haven't even initiated yet, some that are a little bit beyond our control, and others that over the past 4 years, we've made a lot of efforts to make sure we include those and dig a little deeper in making sure that we are actually achieving some of those goals.
And I think too,
excuse me.
Go ahead, Ashley.
John? Thank you. I finally got some audio. I'm sorry, all. I really apologize for that. It was, it's annoying
It's
as
not
heck to
good
me.
now.
Yes. While I appreciate discussion, I do want to keep us sort of on track. And I have a observation, a comment, and I think I would like to make sure everybody else has an opportunity to express themselves regarding what we're talking about, because it does feed directly into our next point of discussion on the agenda. But one thing that I am observing here, and now that I've had a chance to read what was shared with us, John, you mentioned something I think is really at the crux of why we seem to be, as a diversity, equity, and inclusion advisory committee of this city, seemingly in this position that I feel, and this is my observation, I feel there is this disconnect between what is going on internally and what we are to be advising on. And I totally disagree with you in the sense that we're supposed to be focused on different areas. City's internal with feeds out to, has impacts on the external aspects, and we are just focusing on the community at large, so to speak. I think it was a shared responsibility. We were asked to, and you can look it up too, for sure, respond and focus and advise the city on all kinds of measures, including what we're discussing here. The metrics that you're asking us to approve. So I don't disagree that part, but I just want to say that I think that our focus is broad in its scope, which is part of our challenge. But this, I just want to make sure, like, number one, has everyone in the group had a chance to adequately look at this material, and I don't want to put you on the spot necessarily, but I do at the same time. I want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. If you've had an opportunity to look at this, do you understand, all that's in, or do you have questions about what we've been presented, both fronts? I want to make sure that we've all had a chance to look at the materials. And if anybody is feeling like you haven't, I would like to just make sure that we don't proceed without you coming on board, But absent sort of anything to that response, I'm having a hard time with this, John, because, and Mark, I get what you're presenting to us, but it is sort of the first time we're really sort of having a chance to look at it and discuss it. And I think, it's not particularly fair to ask us to make a decision on it tonight. Not that I think that was really the hope, perhaps, but I don't feel comfortable with things as they are. And I don't know that I'd really want to make a decision. So that's why I get that out in the front so that we don't have some sort of misunderstanding about what's expected here. So I want to make sure we're clear on that. And if there is an expectation, I really, again, think we could talk about this all night personally, but I would like to make sure that Alonzo, because now that everyone is collectively learning that you too have retained, I believe, Alonzo to work with the city on some of the internal work. This is what I see as the issue. There seems to be those two tracks. We are not working hand in hand. This is the first time we're getting to have any real discussion about it. I know you've been talking about what's been going on in the city, what's been going on internally, but we as a committee have been left completely out of that process until here's where the measures you've landed on, what you're looking at measuring, and okay, we can debate that, but I don't know. I'm just personally having a hard time understanding how we're going to make this bridge, and I would really like to include Alonzo and maybe move into the next topic of our discussion, because I think this is all relevant. And I think it's something if we're going to try to work together and have any sort of response and sort of relationship here, we need to figure this out, because this is feeling too much like you're driving what's going on than asking us to just approve this. And okay, well, then I think, we need more time to think about it and figure out what we're going to approve and what we're talking about and the implications. But I'll stop talking. And if anyone else, please, if you have something to say to this, please do. Otherwise, I would really appreciate maybe just kind of move into the next part so we can have a complete discussion here. I'm sorry, I just kind of threw a whole bunch at everybody. I apologize for that.
I have thoughts on your feedback, which I appreciate. I'm doing my best to understand the cadence here. So the way that I understand your questions, I'm a big fan of repeating back. So the question is, has everybody had an opportunity to view the document? The other question point is, what is our cadence in working together that it is feeling like we are focusing on two separate things? There's an internal component and an external component. And the way that I understand your concern, Ashley, is it feels like the internal component is driving our external work. So then how does that work? Is that correct?
Yeah,
I just want to jump
in there.
Sorry. I guess just to, Ashley was kind of reaching out to us, and I guess my comment is that you use the word cadence, and I don't see any cadence here. I feel like this committee's been meeting for over a year and a half, I believe, or over a year for sure. I lose track. But I feel like, if you guys were doing a measure that took you from 23 to 75, that's awesome. But why didn't we have any idea that you were doing those measures that were driving, or that were probably playing into your performance measures and things like that? I feel very, very, very disconnected. And it seems as though maybe one doesn't drive the other one, but they should be in tandem, I would think.
Thank you, Beth. And I mean, anybody else have anything you care to share? Because I apologize. It's where I'm at the moment, guys. So, but if there's anybody else has a comment, I would really love to hear it.
How old is this committee?
just over a year and,
Year and a few
you know,
months.
like maybe Beth said.
Yeah.
June 9th of 2020 is when the ordinance was developed.
So
Almost.
can I ask, were there things already in play that the city was working on when the committee was formed? And this is a result of that?
The city, for example, has been working on the MEI index for 3-4 years now. Obviously, I've only been with the city a little over 3 years. The work on, are we considering the LGBTQ in our policies and procedures? Obviously, that started long before I joined the city of Oshkosh. So the MEI is something we've been working on for years, and I believe we've brought it up in this meeting a couple of times before. And I know I've sent out our progress on the MEI in the past, but we certainly have never focused on it as a conversation in one of these meetings, for example.
If I could jump in too, you know, council directed the city manager, like, you know, one of his goals that we wanted was, as it says, to incorporate, you know, DEI into the day-to-day operations of the government. So I think, you know, I think that's what's been happening, but, you know, at the same time, you know, it's also the committee's goal and purpose to, one, help, you know, execute, like, suggest to council ideas, suggest internal and external. And I feel as though, you know, the short time I've been on the committee, that we haven't been able to do that a lot, but that's really because, one, we were focused on our plan, because that was the number one priority of this committee, was to create a strategic plan, which is what we're, you know, the hope is to do now. And I think that mainly is the biggest reason why there hasn't been maybe that working together. We need the plan done before we can really start doing anything else. But, you know, in terms of things that have been kind of happening outside of this committee, council has directed the city manager to be doing those things. So I think that's, you know, perfectly reasonable to be happening. But, you know, I think the point is we need to get this plan done. And part of that is developing that plan, is looking at the goals and the performance measures that were given to us.
I don't want to take up anybody else's time if they want to speak, but I'd just like to say too that there's been a variety of things that have been happening departmentally for quite some time in individual departments. They've been more action item oriented, I would say, but I don't think we've done a good job organizationally, you know, creating kind of an organizational plan to go forward. So although people have kind of been working in isolation in different departments on different initiatives, this is really, I think, the first time that we as an organization have worked comprehensively, you know, with the training, with the kind of planning event, and then the development of these measures. So I'm sorry if it seems abrupt, but I tried to just chronicle as much as I could, you know, without, you know, boring you with all these activities that every department's been doing, or, you know, for quite some time. And also, you know, it's a fine line between, you know, what we're doing internally and, you know, what ideas we may have. You know, we certainly wouldn't want you to think that we're trying to direct this committee either. You know, that's not the purpose at all. I think that it's important for us to work together, and it's my hope that, you know, with our employee committee and with this committee and with Alonzo's help, you know, we can focus on internal and external things. And the more we work together, I think the more seamless that'll become. That's just my perspective on it.
I would like to add that, Alonzo, I think you bring up a really good question in asking whether the city staff has started some of these initiatives before the start of this committee. And, you know, I know that there have been many efforts that have begun before our committee. And I would be comfortable with the goals that John and Mark have laid out to be our baseline, a good starting point. In our plan, they do cross and cover the areas that that we have been directed to that we have been directed to kind of to cross or to look at. So, as part of this committee, I would be comfortable with those goals that they outlined as kind of our starting point. I mean, it's, I think that's the whole reason they brought it to this committee tonight, is so that we can start discussing it. So I appreciate that they did bring the document and that they do have this draft presented to us tonight. And I think these are all good, healthy discussions that we're having. And so thank you to John and Mark for the work that you have done. And yeah, let's think, and I appreciate everyone else's discussions too.
Well, thank you all for your inputs on that. And again, I definitely, this is all it is. I don't disagree, Angie. It is a good starting point and stuff we can work into it. I believe, John, you had stated at one point that these were not like static, that they could be amended, things could be added in addition to.
Absolutely.
That is, I think, a point. Yeah.
I think it is. It really, I think Angie said it well. It really is intended to be a starting point. And I think the more our group can become aware, I think the better we can become with our measures too. I think these are just a base for us to begin with, but we wanted to try to get something going so we could start on our journey and try to improve as best we can.
Okay.
And Ashley, with respect to your comment that, if you are uncomfortable approving this at this time, I can respect that. I don't want you just to rubber stamp. I don't think that was council's intent. Council wanted you to, specifically in their words, they wanted you to approve them, and merely, as you saw from the draft memo, we're simply going to report, here's what DEI approved. If you're not ready to approve, that's okay. And any comments you can give us, whether it's now or another time. Fitz was very focused on wanting to get the goals done before the end of the year, but at the same time, sometimes you stick a fork in a cake to see if it's done. If it's not done, you put it back in. You don't just say, well, it says here 45 minutes, it's been 46, it's got to be done. Let's do it right.
Sure.
We got plenty. The whole MEI thing is a great example. When we got that score originally, it was kind of embarrassing. We're not required to do that, but once we were presented with the challenge, it's like, we're going to get that score up. And I'm proud of the work that staff did to get that improvement. And I'm okay saying where are other areas, because what we're going to find out is we're a very imperfect organization, and our pursuit of perfection. What did Lombardi say? If you pursue perfection, but if you achieve excellence, you're doing okay. Let's pursue perfection, and if we settle for excellence, I'll be more than happy. I'm proud of that 75 score. For example, I think some of these initial measures are going to be not so great. Here's something to shoot for. That getting departments to buy into when but we want to be at this high level. Let's start somewhere. And if you guys aren't comfortable with the goals, then I'm not going to be comfortable with the goals either. And Aaron, I'm putting you and the rest of council on the spot, but isn't pursuing a more worthwhile measure better than just rubber stamping? Yeah, this will work. Let's go. They're not even fully done. If you look at some of those measures, like the income-based approach,
Right.
I got a few ideas within each department.
Right.
And
We want to intentionally leave a little flexibility too, so because we want the employees to be engaged, you know, we want this to be meaningful. We didn't want to just create them and then dictate to them. You know, we want them to believe that this is an important thing for all of us to focus on together. So some of them are, as Mark said, a little bit more general than specific for that purpose.
But if you have any initial comments, please provide, for example, Carmen said, hey, what about age? Hey, I'm one of those. So I want to make sure we're okay on that. But we have a lot of dimensions. I think that was the word that Fitz used in his memo. There's a lot of dimensions, and I want to make sure we're hitting as many dimensions as possible.
Right. Well, I don't intend to be an obstructionist. It's never been my goal. So I'll just put that out there, to be frank. And, if others, nor do I direct this group. I mean, this is not my group. If others are comfortable with things and this is where it stands, it's the majority rules here to some extent. We have to come to some consensus. Because if everybody's comfortable and you feel strongly, feel free to make a motion to move this forward. Otherwise, I would think that, maybe if there is some additional thought that could be shared with us, because John, you shared some of these things around citizen surveys and the employee surveys. And, I feel in order for us to actually give any decent advice or feedback, while we could approve these as they are, but we don't really know what that means. That's my concern. It's like, if I'm feeling like I'm going to give any good advice is, well, how are some of these things being conducted? What are those specific metrics and actions that are going to be taken? And if that's not the kind of feedback you're looking for from us, then I need to better understand what it is. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. But, it's a group decision as to where they stand to this and what we want to do with it. Or, because we're having the discussion now, protracted as it is.
I've
And if
seen
you have any
Carmen's
questions,
hand up
happy to
for a
answer.
while, so I just want to let her know I see you, Carmen.
Oh, good. Hey, thank you. I'm sorry, it's a terrible icon. Sorry, Carmen.
Can't
You're
hear
on
you.
mute, man.
You're muted, Carmen.
Maybe, there we go. I was having trouble with that. I also feel like I think what Alonzo is going to help us do is horse before cart. That's what I'm feeling, so that if we can work on that plan first, since he's also working with the city to some degree. And I do feel there are some voids in what I saw in terms of represented groups. So, I mean, I know it's nice to end the year with a win. When you've worked so hard, you want to get something from one column to the next. And I get that. I also feel like we have not been as efficient as a committee as we'd like to be, because honestly, we've had 2 meetings in person. This is not as efficient as in-person meeting. And we just have to accept this is the life we're in. So I'm going to agree with Ashley that I don't think that I'm personally ready to vote on anything. Not that anything we saw was negative, but I'd like to hear where we're going with Alonzo and that plan first before we vote. I mean, it's not that voting on it doesn't mean it's concrete. I get that it's fluid, change always happens. I understand that, but I also know working with the city entity is harder to change, to go backwards or to change things than it is to just wait. So.
Can I jump in? John, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the appropriate time if anyone on the committee wants to add measures or make changes to the measures that you presented. That kind of is the purpose of right now, correct? That's what we're doing?
Well, as long as they feel comfortable even entertaining the idea, right? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, and this is, and I don't mean to sound blunt, maybe this is because, I don't want to say council's getting impatient, but we are getting a little impatient with these measures. We've been talking about them and trying to, bring them up for a while. And, the email was sent. What, I don't know when it was sent exactly. I guess maybe we didn't get enough time to read them. I'm seeing that it was sent on the 24th of November. Maybe, I don't know if it was sent before that.
No, this really hasn't been sent to council at all yet.
I know not council, but the committee. Was that the first time these measures were sent to us?
Oh, I think they were sent out with the agenda packet. Is that correct, Michelle?
Yes, and I think that was the 24th.
Okay. I mean,
And then we had a holiday in between.
yeah, it's the 29th. So, you know, like,
Right.
I would understand if maybe we were given a month in advance to look over those and, you know, had some time to think of changes or ideas, but that's 5 days with Thanksgiving in between. I don't think that's an appropriate amount of time for this committee to, you know, come up with different changes and ideas. I like that it's being presented, but, you know, I would have to agree, and obviously it's not up to me, but I would agree that I think more time is needed for this committee to make that decision.
Well, thank you, Aaron, for that input as well. I guess, does anyone else have a thought on the matter?
I would like to ask, I know we canceled our December meeting. Does anyone else think that maybe we can hold a December meeting just to discuss, or like a special December meeting just to discuss this? That would give us maybe a week or two to look over the document, add any suggestions or feedback, and then just have this one agenda item and just have a special meeting before the holiday break.
I like that idea, Angie. It seems reasonable and would keep us moving along. And I know that is also a concern. We need to make sure that we are, you know, feeling like we are being productive and helpful as well. So I'm certainly open to that measure if that's what you're proposing.
I just wonder if, you know, if this were postponed till our January meeting, if it's just gonna lose some of its momentum and you know, we'll forget about it until the January meeting and, you know, cycle through some of our same discussions. And if our committee's comfortable with that, I could make a motion to hold a special meeting in December to discuss this draft. Okay. I will make a motion that we hold a special meeting in December to review this document and make a vote then.
I second the motion.
Okay. We'll take roll.
Any further discussion?
Looking at this meeting date, do we have a date in mind? Because I think that before I would vote, I would want to know what we're looking at. And a length of the meeting.
So I've been late to the party. I've been absent a couple of months for my meetings because of personal reasons, but I don't feel I know enough to jump onto this. It feels a little too general for me, you know, and I don't know what the direction that is. I think in general, I think about the purpose of this committee, and it seems to me that we're not kind of congruent with the city. We're at different steps, and you know, the goal is to be more diverse and more inclusive. I think that starts with the community and the perception that people have of the community, and it feels like this piece is going in that direction, but we have missed the community in general. And I just want to know more about this to see how this is going to be the footing for us to move forward, you know, in this committee.
Well, if we just kept it on the same date, we could look at the 13th or the 6th. The 6th is a week out, you know, if everyone feels it's adequate, or Joaquin, if 2 weeks, maybe the 13th, if a Monday and I don't know, half an hour. I mean, if we're prepared, it shouldn't take very long, you know, but maybe an hour max.
Can share with you that broadcasting would not be available on those dates due to other meetings. You know, obviously I've talked to media quite extensively when we changed dates. And I do know.
Was it necessary?
absolutely not available at that time.
I don't know that it would be necessary to have it broadcast. I mean, it's still publicly noticed. We could still have official record. I just think for this, you know, that's not a concern of mine in particular. I don't know if anyone has a particularly strong feeling about being broadcast for a special
And if the
meeting.
sole agenda item is to approve or vote on this, I agree that broadcasting it wouldn't be a priority.
Is the 20th out of the question? Is that too close to Christmas for some people? I assume the 27th is out of the question because that week's always just weird anyway. It'd give you an extra week then also to review.
The 20th will work for me. I'm not sure everybody else.
That's great. That works.
Oh, that worked for you? I wasn't, I couldn't tell, Ashley. 20th okay?
Works for me. It'll be fine, but we need the group.
The 20th and 27th aren't good for me.
I'll make a point of being there on the 20th if you need to do it on the 20th.
Thanks, Mark.
20th works
Okay,
for
can we
me.
look at it?
I'm fine. I have no life. It's COVID. Can't travel on a plane, so I'm here.
Oh.
So is someone making a motion for the 20th? Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
I don't think we ever voted on.
We didn't
Or-
vote on that, so Angie, do you want to amend your motion to include that date?
Sure. I amend my motion for this committee to meet on the 20th to discuss and vote on this plan proposed by John and Mark.
At 5:15, correct?
At the same time.
I think so.
For 1 hour.
Maximum.
1 hour. There's not enough wine. No, I'm just joking. 1 hour.
Do we have a second for Angie's motion?
I second the motion.
Okay. Any further discussion? Or Heather can take the roll.
I will take roll. Lee,
Okay, thank you, Heather.
Aye.
Lyra,
Aye.
Scott,
Aye.
Roberts,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Hess.
Aye.
All ayes.
Okay, and I'm just gonna
Alright.
break for a moment because my bad. When Ashley was having trouble with his microphone, I skipped the approve the minutes from the previous meeting agenda item. Ashley, I don't suppose you could go back to that one for me.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Again, I apologize for my issues earlier there. Yeah, do we have, can I get a motion to approve our meeting minutes from October 25th?
I move to approve the minutes from our last meeting, October 25th.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? No? Okay, barring none, can you take roll then, please?
Sure. Lee,
Aye.
Lyra,
Aye.
Scott,
Aye.
Roberts,
Aye.
Yang. Aye. Johnson,
Aye.
Hess.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. We got that covered. And, you know, just proves how terrible of a timekeeper I am. So we had 15 minutes for that previous discussion scheduled, but we far exceeded that. But it was definitely helpful, and thank you all for participating. And I hopefully didn't throw us off too much. And again, with that, the next part of the agenda, we were hopefully to move into our plan facilitation discussion with Alonzo. And again, Alonzo, welcome to the group.
I appreciate it.
We really appreciate you being here and get to participate in some of the dynamics, and you get to see a little bit about what's going on. And I think the importance of this plan and trying to get us moving along and help organize it. So I'll just kind of pause from there and let you go. Thank you.
Appreciate it. So officially, again, humbled by the call to serve. Thank you, everyone, for that. Here's where I'll start. When you gather a group of well-intentioned people in the same space who all want the same thing, it becomes even more important that we understand what we're doing. So a couple observations I've made, a couple recommendations on things we should consider, and one point of clarity. And I think I'm going to start with the clarity. So I've heard a few times during the meeting the phrase, Alonzo is working with the city. I'd like to clarify that so we're all on the same page. So I love Oshkosh. I would do anything for the city. Let's just get that out there. You've heard that there are some trainings that have already taken place and some trainings that are coming up. Those are not me. So the idea that I've already been working with the city, I would like to clarify. I am absolutely ready, willing, and able to provide additional support as called upon. That has yet to be defined. So I look at our committee and the city, and I have had the same question since the original call. Help me understand how the committee supports the city's initiatives. How does the committee do that? I'm a big fan of understanding what I referenced, a cadence, or I'm a visual learner and I talk with my hands. So I'm going to do the double Dutch thing. So we're both twirling the rope, but that entry is important. When do we enter? How do we enter? Where do we enter? And so what I've separated, and I'll start with a question. I separate the what and the when from, the what and the why from the how and the when. What and why, and how and when. And who is responsible for what? So I'll give you a for example. Who drives the initiatives of feeling like everyone in Oshkosh feels like they belong in the city? Who does that, and what is the committee's role in that? So that's part of like what I'm looking for, because I'm feeling that, and it's all rooted in love. I'm feeling the frustration in, so what is our role in this thing that we're asked to approve, since I had no participation in it? And in the back of my mind, I'm wondering if we all understand what our role was with that document. The second thing I'll put out there, and then we can come back and discuss them further if you want, is there is a role clarity model out there. Maybe you've seen it in event planning. The acronym is RACI, RACI. And the way that it works, the R stands for recommend. And you can have an unlimited number of people that make recommendations. I'm going to skip A for a second. The C is consult. You can have an unlimited number of people with whom you consult before you make a decision, though that number being too big is not advised. You could consult to death, right? The I is inform, and these are the people who just get the memo. This is what we're doing. The A is very important. The rules under A is you can only have one. You can only have one A. So who is the person, or in our case, the body that approves what it is we're doing? So in my learning style, which is visual, if we decide we're going to have an employee appreciation day, Who makes the recommendation on where that's going to be? And who do we consult with the, in terms of, is that the appropriate place to have it? Who ultimately approves this is what we're doing that day and where? And who are the people who get the memo? Where I am not entirely clear in the RACI model is what is the committee? So when we said we're going to meet, I kept my mouth shut because I did not want to hijack the conversation. We're going to have another meeting to vote and approve the memo. In the back of my mind, I was thinking, can we do that? Like, could we actually stop it? Do we have the authority to say, these are not the measures we want? We get together in December, and do we have the ability to change it? Is my question, like, for me to understand. And then finally, order matters. There's a whole lot that we want to do, as I'm understanding in the few meetings that I've had. And I think we can agree we can't do them all at the same time. So what is our plan of all the things we'd like to do, understanding our role in the plan? And in what order, I'm going to use my own language, are we recommending the city execute against? Now, I could be wrong, but I'm not seeing our committee as an A. Like, what can the city approve, unless I'm misunderstanding it? So those are my general high-level thoughts. The first is what and why, how and when, who decides that, and what is our role? The second is, in a matter of role clarity, recommend, approve, consult, and inform. What is the committee as it relates to partnering with the city? And then finally, as the committee comes up with a strategic plan, in my head, it is a recommended plan for the city to execute against. And in what order are we recommending they do that? So I'll pause and see if you have any general thoughts or ideas on what I shared. You're all staring at me like I'm crazy. Okay.
Oh,
no.
This is Anne Marie Johnson. Alonzo, I don't think you're crazy at all.
Thank you.
I had just thought that was when I this is only my third meeting with the group, so I hadn't spoken up because I didn't know the difference. I thought it was just a memo to the committee for information on what the city was doing. I didn't know that we would be voting on anything until it was brought up. So your comments make perfect sense to me. But I don't really know how the committee's working either, but what you say makes a lot of sense to me.
Thank you.
That I think it's important to answer those questions.
So I'm gonna pull in Ashley because I like the way Ashley thinks. Yeah. Like, I really like the way you think.
Well, I appreciate that, and vice versa. But one of the things I would say, ultimately, the decision maker and the approval and the authority, it's council. I mean, we're an advisory body. We are to advise and provide our input wherever we're asked. That advice, sometimes it seems to be more authoritative, like in this circumstance, you're looking for approval. Well, okay, if we don't approve it, would the city still move ahead? Would they move ahead without our recommendation? Will they allow us to take our input? So what I'm hearing is they would, there's room to improve. There's room to dig in a little deeper and make recommendations. And that could be what we recommend and move forward. But again, it's all advisory and it's recommendations. Ultimately, council will make the decision. And so, Aaron, please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding of this. And it's a little ambiguous to me as to how we'll be utilized and how we work in support of the city, because there's not been a lot of this type of engagement or direct dialogue with a purpose as far as seeking input into city actions. I mean, there's been some, we've made recommendations, we've taken some input that we've gotten from, the community, and, there've been resolutions drafted and passed and moved forward and things of that nature. But I think from my perspective, this is, aside from the original charge from council to come up with a plan, a much broader document that that we would work against. Ultimately, the city's authority and approval, the council.
I'm a visual learner, so I like to give examples that I can touch. So for example, we'll just call it a season. So this season, we have brothers and sisters, we have people in our community celebrating Hanukkah. You also have family members in our community celebrating Kwanzaa. You have others celebrating Christmas, and you have others not celebrating at all. So when I look at this committee and I think about the way that I understand the charge, not so much saying what the mailroom department should be focused on with employees, but what are we doing for the city? Would this committee make the recommendation that the city find a way to explain and or celebrate all the different ways people in our community are celebrating this season? Like, we would recommend the city find a way to do that. Or does this committee say, okay, you need to run a commercial for Hanukkah and explain it to everybody, and I need to see a banner at the park for Kwanzaa, and please be mindful that not everybody celebrates Christmas, so we're going to say happy holidays. Like what is our understanding of our role?
Mm-hmm. I go ahead, Beth, or anybody else, but
I can maybe answer that. I pulled up the document from when the committee was first created, like what basically outlines their purpose, and one of the duties is to educate the public about diversity, equity, inclusion. It says the committee will implement a public education plan and actively plan, sponsor, and participate in events that promote and celebrate diversity. So I think there is that confusion where it's, what is the committee's external role? Like, do they actually go out and do things, or is it just asking council to do that? And I think that's where where some of the confusion lies.
It's a bit of the both. And, we're asked to do some of that work, trying to figure out what resources we had available, trying to do any of this under a pandemic circumstance, trying to take, and utilize what resources the city has, figuring out what that is. So it's a mix. But to the point that Aaron just made, we were asked to actually carry these functions out. Is that reasonable? To what extent? It's still gray. I mean, we could carry it out through existing mechanisms the city has and utilize some of their tools, through PR and outreach, but that hasn't been executed or developed as a plan, because it seemed like the priority was to develop this other larger plan, strategic thing for city and for council. It was all in the mix. So as to what came first, we've had some debates about that, I think, over our existence, and we've strongly been pushing more towards focusing on a plan as of late, simply to try to align with the city. But, there's plenty to do.
So the question I have in my head is, how do we resolve this, right? So we need I would recommend this plan that we're supposed to have, that be the committee's priority. I do not know the mechanism for that plan. It is my understanding that every time we meet, that needs to be publicly notified. Is that correct? Right? So I recognize that there's an emergency meeting to, again, vote on this memo, and I am not a voting member of the body. I do think we need to make it a priority to agree that as soon as possible when we meet, it's about a plan. Or your agenda will again be filled in January with updates.
Right. No, agreed. And that is which is why we are excited to have you and get some resources and finally able to move things in a direction to enlist some additional support, because we are only meeting once a month. There's a lot to do in between. we have some concepts and ideas, and really, like we touched on, I think briefly, to ensure that we're drawing that out and structuring that and just getting this moving and make sure that's the focus, that's kind of the level of assistance we're looking for. Because I do agree, and I think that's what we've kind of concluded in the last handful of months, that this needs to be our priority. But absent getting some resources such as yourself, I don't need to call you a resource, so to speak, but it's it's some help, in achieving this goal. That's where we're at, quite frankly, from my perspective.
For what it's worth, Ashley, this is just my 2 cents. I think the intent was the plan would maybe answer some of the questions that Alonzo's having. It's primarily advisory. And one of the challenges with this committee and the other committee that I've mentioned this to council is our sustainability board. It's easy when you talk about Parks Board, it's about parks. Plan Commission, it's about planning. SAB and DEI cross every single department, and it crosses the entire community. So, what area are they responsible for? The answer is yes. What are they not responsible for? The answer is yes too. And getting those sea legs so they can say, where do we want to put our priorities? So I think the strategic plan is extremely important. I think some other issues have captured the interest. The one thing where it's not just advisory, the DEI goals, the council specifically delegated. So they pretty much said, you will approve these measures and then we'll report. So the reason the memo was written the way it was, it's a draft after the DEI committee approves. This is what we have because council said we are going to rely on DEI to provide staff. And if you don't like what we have, we need you to tell us. If you like what we have, great. And let's go and start measuring. But mostly advisory, but I think the strategic plan could put some twists on that. There may be some recommendations but there might be some authority. Is that what your A is? Again, is your A authority? Was that
approval?
It? Approval. Okay. Yeah. Approval for the measures, they are definitely that A. For these other things, it's consult. I mean, they're really eventually the plan would be approved by the council, at least in my mind's eye. So for what it's worth, that's my 2 cents, and I'll be quiet.
So what would be the best way for me to support moving this along? I could provide, similar to one of the documents for diversity in terms of metrics, I could provide a template and then the committee fill it in, like a framework, if you will, and you fill it in. If that would be helpful, or if we would get together again and again be on the same page in terms of here's what I understand our role to be. This is the plan I understand we're being charged with creating, and then create it that way.
Alonzo, here's something to consider perhaps for everyone. I think a template is helpful just because it gives us structure, gives us something to fill in. But if you're able to, just given the way we have to be careful about records or meeting notices, if there's a means for us to do either in twos, perhaps, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we could meet with 2 at a time to kind of work through that process, maybe work through the template, have some discussion, make sure we're getting some individual input so that when we do come together, there is sort of a master view of everybody's sort of inputs, and then we can, start to share that out collectively as a thought.
I'm all about rules, so whatever we can do that doesn't break the rules.
Others?
Are you saying 2 as in Alonzo and 2 people, or just 2 people without Alonzo?
Sorry. Thank you, Carmen. As it would be, Alonzo would meet with 2 of our committee members at a time to kind of talk through that template and to really start to solicit our input. So it would be 2 committee members with Alonzo. I believe that would be something we could do. It's just a procedural thing.
Just a housekeeping thing. If you created a subcommittee, that subcommittee is a public body. I wouldn't get intimidated by the public body, the public noticing. All that means is Michelle and her staff need to put out a notice, and the chance, I mean, how many people are watching in on tonight's meeting? Not really many people, if any. If it's a 2-person subcommittee and they work with Alonzo, I would say you get together, you talk. If you have it as a face-to-face meeting, you go into 404, you mask up and you do your meeting, or you do it like this and you offer the link. And if nobody links in, it's like nobody entered the room. I wouldn't get worried about it. I would just, if you like that approach, Ashley, just do it. We'll work out the details to make sure that you're legal and everything, but I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay.
I think we have a lot of very intelligent, passionate people here. I feel extremely comfortable with 2 people and Alonzo having a meeting, disseminating that information to the rest of us in some method. I don't think we all have to have our hands held. We can all read what's already here, and I think a couple of people taking the lead on this and then sharing that, I feel very comfortable whether I'm one of those people or not. I don't think we need, because I don't think, I mean, I know this sounds crass. Alonzo is not going to be meeting with 2 people at a time, an hour at a time, for free.
No, he is not.
No, he is not. Nor do I think we need that. I think that the people who feel really passionate about this, about moving it along, I think we're all capable of having that discussion and sharing that information. I think we're all adults and we can read it. Otherwise, we should not be on this committee.
So
and as long as we do it before our next scheduled meeting, giving us 4 or 5 days to look at those recommendations or the red flags that may or may not come up, I'm fine with that.
Well,
the next scheduled meeting would be January 24th. Am I understanding how you meet correctly?
Have that special meeting we just voted on.
Yeah, besides that one.
That would be a January meeting, yes, because we don't have a December meeting. So the question is, can we do something in the next week or so with that 2 people plus Alonzo disseminating information so that on the 20th or whatever date that was, the 20th, we all have something that we can share based on what that meeting was. That way we could potentially approve or disapprove this before the end of the year, which sounds like it was a goal. Otherwise, we're going to wait all the way till January, which I'm fine with waiting, but.
Could I ask a question of clarification, if that's okay? So what is the purpose of this meeting and what information is being disseminated?
The 2-on-1, the 2 people or the whole meeting?
The 2-on-1.
So I think that's something Ashley should probably address.
Well, Aaron, it was just a potential way of moving forward with discussing, like Alonzo suggested, you could bring a template to help start to put some framework on the strategic plan development. And then, here's the question is like, well, then given how we meet, how do we start to really fill that in, if I understood it correctly? And like, what would be an appropriate approach for us to take? So I just suggested maybe he meet with 2 people at a time. Maybe it was 4 people, but just some subset of our committee, if there's interested bodies, to sort of meet with Alonzo and have that discussion. So, it's suggested, and that would be the idea, at least to get that framework put together, and initially, put in some, provide some inputs. We have a framework, we have a model, we have some ideas, but to start to get that nailed down.
And is that specific? Would that be specifically about the goals of this
What
plan?
I thought it was on that draft document that was presented to us tonight
Yeah,
that none of us really felt comfortable. So my understanding was that two people meeting with Alonzo is not just our committee, but what's that bridge
So
between this
that would,
document?
yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
So
But
that's separate then from the plan, because the committee is charged with creating the plan, but in addition to that plan, those performance measures were another component. So but we're talking about the performance measures, not the plan, is what I'm understanding. Or are we talking about the plan? Because those are two separate things.
two separate things. What I understood was the performance measures, because we called a meeting for the 20th to discuss the performance measures, that we didn't feel comfortable with this document right now. So if what we're doing is the start and continuation of the plan, why are we having this meeting on the 20th at all? If we're not ready to discuss the plan. Because that was a very specific meeting on the 20th for the plan that we were presented in draft document and didn't feel comfortable as a committee voting yay or nay.
So here, I'll jump in real quick. I am not comfortable committing to having a strategic plan for this committee for the next year done in the next week. I am not comfortable committing to that. So I appreciate Aaron's push. My understanding of the 20th is explicit to what was presented to us already. I was talking about a plan for our work for the next year going ahead. So I'm not comfortable saying that'll be done in a week for people to review by the 20th.
Nor should it be.
Yeah.
So what the meeting on the 20th is for the draft document we got.
Yes.
Is that something, Ashley, that we want to do, two people plus Alonzo? Are you comfortable doing that, guiding us through that, or is that something we can just do without you? Or do we have to do it at all? Can we all just read and do our homework?
So,
That
so
would be my
Carmen,
suggestion would be, oh, sorry. You were addressing Ashley, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, Beth. What is your suggestion?
No, I was just gonna say my suggestion would be that we read and do our homework, and then on the 20th, we say yay or nay to that plan. I don't know why we need a subgroup for that, but that's just my opinion.
Correct. And that was my understanding all along, is that meeting is just that meeting. We will do our homework. We come prepared with recommendations. We're capable of doing that. That's our function. That's our business. We'll do that. I understood Alonzo's question as he restated, how are we going to move forward for this next year, this bigger strategic plan piece? So that's where I was suggesting that, that's why I wanted to potentially meet in smaller groups as a way to avoid, some rules violations, in subcommittees. It's just, if it was smaller subsets of the main committee, or if it was just, a handful of people, maybe there's 5 of us that really have a passion for it. Maybe there's 4, maybe there's 3, maybe there's only 2, but some subset would meet with Alonzo to start to structure and frame out the strategic plan. If you don't have an interest in it, okay, and you don't want to be a part of the development of that, fine, but at least you'll have an opportunity to respond to it. But that was my understanding, is that Alonzo was asking for some suggestions or thoughts on how to proceed forward in that bigger one. So it just seemed to make sense to meet with a smaller group if there's a handful that wanted to meet for that specific subcommittee's work of starting to frame out the strategic plan and getting that process moving.
Can you clarify something for me? You are your calendar year, right? In terms of our
calendar
year.
year. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, like for example, if on January 24th, whatever that date would be, the next time we have a scheduled meeting, we were presenting this committee with a draft for approval, did we already lose a month? That's what I'm trying to understand. You see what I'm saying?
Essentially, yes. That
Okay.
it's the first of the year, so we wouldn't meet until the 24th. That whole month,
Right.
essentially, will have gone by. Yes.
So we meet in January, we present the committee with a draft plan. The committee says, yes, we like this plan going forward. Then we give that plan to the city. And then we got to wait a month for them to say yes.
Well, I don't know how that will ultimately play out in the end. I mean, we will draft a strategic plan, however long it takes. I mean, I guess,
Okay.
yes, there are dollars involved. You know, I don't know what limitations there are on your time and how we need to budget our utilization, you know, in that sense. But it will take as long as it takes. If we can start chunking it out, possibly get section by section, maybe we can get something developed first and present it to council. They would, I think, prefer a completely fully fleshed out in these first pass, but you know, it is what it is.
Well, I would
You know,
recommend the committee let me work with Ashley as our chair to figure out who else would be involved in this first round and then get started on that as soon as respectfully possible. I think everybody would appreciate that. So we can all breathe. There's like this collective, I feel through my screen.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Just to clarify, when we meet on the 20th, is there also going to be a discussion, or is that something we're just going to vote based on the information? You know, I just want to, because I have questions about some of this stuff, and that's not that I'm, you know, opposed to moving forward, but I just have questions about some of these things. They're too broad.
I think my understanding is that we all go and do our homework. We have an hour to come back, have that discussion, clarify questions that individuals have, do additions, subtractions, whatever it is, then we vote. Is that correct? In that hour, if we do our homework.
No, that's correct. And Joaquin, I think we can work on getting some of those questions, you know, and others, if there are specific questions, you know, that we need to maybe write them down and we can figure out who is best suited to answer them. It might be needing to go to someone within, you know, city, it could be HR, it could be, you know, but I think the more we can do to get that addressed and individual questions answered so that when we do come to the meeting, you know, it's an easier process to make those amendments or have any discussions that need to be had.
Yeah, I just want to understand the purpose of some of these questions. I mean, I the broad purpose, but some of them specifically, I'm just hung up on some of them, and I would like to have more understanding of that, what the purpose is, or the intent.
And you're not alone. So I think it would be reasonable, perhaps, if you have and others, you could either send me perhaps a list of questions. I can compile them and share them with Michelle, and we can at least, if that seems appropriate, get a list of all of our collective questions. That might be an approach to starting to get some of those answers. If we can start to develop a FAQ of sorts for our own internal work on this, on the metrics that were presented to us. Yes. I mean, I'm open to that. If you wanted to share those, if you're comfortable. Otherwise, maybe to send them directly to Michelle.
No, I'm fine with sending them to you. I'm kind of problem with that. Either way, I'm fine either way. Just, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, then I would say send them my way, and the same goes with anyone on the committee, please. And we can start to really get that done so that we are most appropriately prepared for our next meeting on the 20th.
I'd like to volunteer to be on. Oh.
No, go ahead, Angie.
Oh, I'd like to volunteer to be on the, I don't want to call it the subcommittee, but the smaller group to work on the strategic plan. And also just to clarify, earlier when I commented on the metrics that were presented to us, and I said that might be a good starting point, that is what I meant, and not to create further confusion, but in our strategic plan, the metrics that the city has presented with us might be good starting point for us to look at as far as what we want to recommend in our strategic plan. Because those are already, you know, whatever that we propose are the metrics will be what is collected through data, and that is ultimately what we will have to present to council as well, is that not just the goals but the data with that. And so just based on what we have as resources, we can be smart about it and, you know, have the city collect the data, whatever data we need. And so if there's alignment with the metrics that this document presents, and then the goals that we ultimately recommend, I think that shows more uniformity and you know, a stronger collective, you know, effort between city and our committee as well, if that makes sense.
I'm going to jump in as long as we're talking about the formation of our own strategic plan. I hope that we can go back and look at our notes for the last year, almost year and a half, because there has been so much discussion in terms of interest of what we'd like to do. And I hope that all of our notes, especially some of the early on notes, are reviewed as that's taking place.
Absolutely, and that's going to help feed not only the strategic plan, but thank you, Beth. I think you might be getting at not everybody's interested in the strategic plan. There are other interests and other activities that we're also charged with that others have an interest in. And
yes,
that was my prime concern in this, because I know it's bone dry and as boring as all get out for some. Totally get it, because that's not where you're at. I totally get it. I don't want to lose your other interests and your passions. You're all volunteering to be on this advisory group as well as myself. You know, I want to make sure that we have these other venues moving ahead. We need to come up with our own strategic plan and our own plan of operations, like, because we are charged with a lot of things. If somebody has some time or thoughts, we still haven't figured out how to best utilize our public voice that we have at this forum through the Herald. We still, you know, you brought up, you know, calendars and like just general acknowledgement of what is as far as the diversity that exists in our city. We don't have a formal means or mechanism. I mean, not to say that we couldn't pull something together, or that the city doesn't already have vehicles to, you know, support that, but we just haven't really had that structured time to sit down and figure that out. So I think to your point, perhaps, or to my own point, I'll say is, again, if you have these interests, if you have some resources or a tool to help kind of come up with a calendar of activities or just something to move ahead on. If there are significant events coming up that you know of, you know, early on, other group members were bringing things to the table of community events and activities that we knew of, things we could elevate and echo through this channel, you know, whatever it may be. Please, I encourage everyone to continue to do that. And to continue to think out, you know, how do we kind of utilize our collective resources and support networks and things, and really how do we use our committee as a platform to support, you know, other measures and activities in the community that really would foster not only that feeling but true spirit and true level of inclusivity and acceptance and welcomeness, you know, and what we are all striving to, you know, bring about change and positive change in our own ways. So, yeah, I don't want us to get lost in this, but it's just an important piece. We structurally have to get this done. It's an important piece of work. But again, I don't want to lose all these other opportunities that we have and keep moving things ahead. So,
you know, I just want to say that I think, the strategic plan is a roadmap, and if we don't have that in place, the other important things that we are interested in are not going to be dispersed. And so I think it's really important that that plan is in place so that we can put our interest into the community. Of course, we can bring onto the table all those things that we advocate for, just to, you know, highlight them so the community knows our interest. But I do think that it's really, really important that we have a roadmap, or we're going to keep on bumping heads. We've been doing this for a year, and it's getting a little dizzier in here. You know, we need to start have some direction.
Agreed. Agreed.
So my understanding is that Ashley and Angie are the two people that have volunteered to, oh, it's our A group. Alonzo, Ashley, Angie are the only A's in there. All right. So, oh, Aaron, sorry, you're not a voting member. So do we need, we don't get to vote on this. Is this something that you're just doing? Because two is the max that we can have in one meeting.
No.
I would think that Ashley
no, it could be more than that.
Right.
Go ahead.
And I'm comfortable with you guys deciding who should be in that group. I think that they would be fine with deciding who should be in that group.
Yeah, I'm not one to exclude anyone. It was just a general number I threw out as this.
No, I'm just basing it on the rules of the game. That's all.
Yes, no, Carmen, fair enough. What I understood Mark saying is the subcommittee, we can just work to make sure it's perfectly publicly noticed, et cetera. So if we had 4 people that wanted to be a part of this discussion, great. If you want to and you don't feel comfortable saying so now, you think about it, send me a message. Again, even if after we get started and you feel like you want to jump in later on, as we move ahead, please, jump in. So I think it can be fluid in that regard, but we'll establish the subcommittee. I'll work with Alonzo, Angie, to at least get some initial time set up. And then, within a week or so, if you do have an interest, please let me know, or Angie know that you would like to be involved, and we can ensure that you're a part of that.
Given that we can have more than 2, I'd like to be involved.
Okay. Thank you, Carmen.
In a bar without no, I'm just joking.
I volunteer.
Well,
hey, some levity, come on.
Okay. Well, that was a rather robust discussion. I thank you, Alonzo, for kind of helping to move us along in that regard, and for participating, and for Aaron and everybody else, and Mark, and just joining in. Your input is really welcome, as well as all the other committee members. I don't want to move on until you're feeling that this area around facilitation, Alonzo, I think, are you in a good spot from your perspective?
I am in a better spot. Yes, I appreciate you checking in. I'm a big fan of see it before you see it. So here's something I want everybody to see when we get together before we talk about it. The first thing I'm going to ask is, do we understand our role? So it'd be weird to map out a strategic plan if we're not all in alignment on what our role is. So that's where I know I'm going to start. But I appreciate you checking in. Thanks, Ashley.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. And yes, it's good. You should probably keep asking that question. Well, I guess with that, I think we should probably move towards the latter part of our agenda here, if everyone's comfortable with that. We had a couple of outstanding issues that we could provide maybe a couple of updates on before we kind of try to wrap things up. I think there was one potential update on the Chief Oshkosh Monument and the Enhancement project, and the status of that. I do believe most people are aware, and if not, that Council had approved moving forward with all 5 plaques as has been recommended and drafted by the Menominee Nation. And some revisions had taken place. It was quite a journey, but they have been approved. That's as much as I know. So if there's additional updates that could be shared by anyone,
I think that's why I'm sticking around. So
thanks.
No, that's
not
okay.
Just entertainment.
Great discuss. Hey, I volunteered for a meeting if as Carmen suggested. So hey, I'm there if you need me. But anyway, Chief Oshkosh project. Yeah, I've asked. Now, obviously, it goes because now it's an approved project. It goes to staff to work with now that and it's located in a park at the Chief Oshkosh Monument. Parks Advisory Board will be getting some renderings and things like that. I think that the initial idea from the Landmarks Commission way back when, about 5 years ago, when this was initially discussed, was this was actually the next phase of the Riverwalk um, uh, the Riverwalk trail system, and there were some interpretive signs put up there along the Riverwalk. You may see one, and you will see one if you go down to Riverside Park. There's one that talks about the old Riverside Park and things like that. That was done in concert with the Parks Department and our public museum. The public museum, they did a wonderful job with People of the Waters, and they're working on the next iteration of that to tell the story past the Treaty of 1832. So they're very well, they've got resources, and they've already reached out to, say, for example, the State Historical Society, because one of the photos that was being talked about by the Menominees is one that we actually don't have the rights to, but the State Historical Society does have that access to. So I've asked staff to work on those things. But we're going to be working on some sign concepts, and we'll be presenting them to the Parks Board, and certainly everybody is welcome to chime in and take a look at those and see what's going on. But it's really about getting that. I'm not worried about, at this point, I'm not worried about the cost. I think the fact that the council approved it and those signs, we got a pretty good idea of what those signs cost based on what we did a few years back. And Ray Maurer, our Parks Director, got a rough estimate about what those would cost right now. And those certainly, that's really the next step. So I think look forward to the Parks Board taking up the issue shortly, and then getting some renderings to start taking a look at it, to add some depth with photographs and interpretive signage that really would make it attractive.
Mark, I have a question. Will like David Chevalier and Arnold, Grignon and Arnold, still be involved in the process, like with the Parks Board? I guess my question in a larger sense is asking if with the Parks Advisory Board not knowing the makeup of membership, if you feel that it's a fair representation, and that the Menominee voices are still being listened to, and those voices are valued in this next step.
Yeah, I think their voices are going to be very valued, and I would think the Parks Board would want that, because the Parks Board, you're right, they're not, for lack of a better term, experts like Mr. Chevalier and Mr. Grignon are. I think that's where the museum's strength really lies, because they worked very closely with the Menominee Nation when they were doing People of the Waters, and I think it wouldn't have been nearly as successful had they not sought that input. We have a new museum director starting on Thursday, but our assistant director was very active with the People of the Waters project as well, and she knows how valuable those relationships and that input is. And when you're talking about interpretive signs, I think they might be able to add more depth. So I can see our staff using that, and I can take that type of feedback and make sure that David and Arnold are still included in that process.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Excellent. I appreciate that, Mark, and that's good news. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'll keep you
cool.
posted as things are going on as well.
No, thank you. That's great. It's very exciting business. Yeah, it feels good. We had next on the agenda, any updates regarding our engagement with the Herald? And
Carmen's article was really good on veterans and her family.
Yeah,
thank you.
I realized really at the 11th hour that Veterans Day came and went, and we didn't have a presence, and I do think we should have. So I contacted Dan, who was so open and gave us a slot. And so I wrote a piece for those who didn't read it, and I did get some very nice feedback from members of the community, and I chose to discuss my family from World War II through Iraq. And because my family is multiracial, I started with my uncle who died in World War II, who I never met. Then added my father-in-law, who is Caucasian, my son, who is mixed race, and was able to share stories about them and how the first uncle chose, rather than doing a life insurance policy for his parents, which when you're, your 20s and you're not married and you're in the military, if you go to a war zone, you get a, insurance policy, never thinking you'll need it. He had the foresight to realize he had 3 young sisters. Why not sign it? So when he passed away in World War II, rather than giving it to established parents, he gave each of his sisters, which came out to be 10,000, because he said every woman, particularly a woman of color, deserves to have an education, whether you're married or not. And I thought that was remarkable in the 40s that would happen. So I wrote that piece. One of the uncles that I shared was by marriage, who ended up, he was the first African-American general in the United States Marine Corps. And ironically, I've been getting all these beep, beep, beep texts all night long because tomorrow is when there's an aircraft carrier. That's the Lieutenant General Frankie Peterson. It gets handed over tomorrow. It's already been commissioned, it's built, and that happens tomorrow on a Facebook Live. So it's interesting that this discussion comes now. So I talked to Dan and I said, are we looking at once a month? And he said, we're looking at whatever you want. Come up with a topic. Give me some words, give me pictures. I really believe in what you're doing and let's do it. So James isn't here. James and Angie, who wrote that first piece, and myself kind of took the lead, but I really want to thank Beth for sending a calendar of the year of the different potential celebrations, holidays, recognition, whatever you want to call them. I talked to Dan and I said, there are so many some months. So we thought about doing a pull-out box so that even if an article talked about one topic, we would still recognize other topics and other celebrations that would happen that month. So here we are in December coming up. And I did write to our 2 committee members. What Beth suggested, or what she put on our calendar, was Universal Human Rights Month. And there's also International Day for people with disabilities. Most of the things in December are days, unless we look at Kwanzaa, we look at Christmas, we look at Hanukkah. We are not limited to the 3 people who have voiced and willingness to write. Is this something the community feels there's value in doing a free article monthly, bi-monthly? What are we looking at? Is that something we want to pursue? Do we think it has value, or is it just, where are we at?
Oh, I think it's clear that there's value. Sorry, Carmen. I'm getting feedback there, so I'll stop.
I mean, I don't want it to turn into an article by only 1 or 2 people. I think the value comes in diversity. In telling a multiple of stories that come from, I'm sorry, I can't even turn this thing off, that comes from our shared experiences, but also no one else could have written the article that Angie wrote. No one could have written the article that I write. But who's going to step up, or does this become one person doing it? Do we do it? I guess I'm asking. Do we have
I feel like
feelings?
that might come out in the plan. that might come out in the plan.
Yeah. So let's do it for now and see if it comes into the strategic plan
So do we
forward?
skip December or do I mean, I can write for days. That's what I do. So do we skip December? Is there somebody else that wants to write something about, oh, we have, 31 days. We have time. Dan feels very comfortable with us. I mean, I wrote him maybe 5 days before it came out and he said, yep, I got a space for you. So he trusts us based on the first 2 articles. He very much loves our mission and what we do.
Well, I think it's wonderful, Carmen, and this is Ashley again. If you have something in mind, I think keep doing, just like Anne Marie noted. Let's just keep, stay engaged. I think if others, we know that you and Angie and James are kind of leading this. If I think others have something they would like to contribute or add, that seems to be we can reach out to the 3 of you, or you or Angie, if you're comfortable with that. It seems to be a logical approach here. But at this point, I would say just charge ahead if you've got a thought, and if somebody else wants to jump in, we can figure that out. But to Alonzo's point, and to what I think will come out, and what will come out, is we need to kind of start coming up with a strategic plan here. But Anne Marie noted, let's just keep making use of it. And hey, if you've got something, go for it, Carmen. I think
Angie, do you
feeling, or Angie, whomever,
do you have an interest,
but yeah.
Angie, in something for December, or should I pick it up?
I do, but I also wanted to open it up to other members and, to see if they have.
I mean, that's how I felt.
Yeah.
We are so diverse. We're so gifted. We all have stories. I mean, I can definitely be an editor. If someone feels like I'm not ready for prime time, I don't have a gift to get it ready. I mean, I was really happy because Dan, I think there was a semicolon versus a comment, and I was like, whoa, great. So I'm more than happy to be an editor. I'm sure Angie is very gifted in that. So if you have a story to tell for one of these months, we can help you. We can do some editing. That's a totally different skill set. But I don't want this opportunity to pass if that's something, but I know the Herald has deadlines, and I think they're very gracious to want us to continue doing this.
Agreed. Maybe you and Angie just toss a coin, but I'm sure we can just figure this out for the month internally. And
all right, Angie, why don't we communicate, see what we come up with? So we'll go ahead and make sure that there's a slot and a pull-out box for the month of December, and then we'll go from there. So, hey.
No, I appreciate the update, and that seems like a logical path forward until we really get something in our plan, more process focused in that front. That was, I believe, the extent of. Was there anything else on? I don't have the digital version of the agenda, so I don't know if there was a report from the council. Did that get added to it?
No, we didn't really have a chance to talk to Aaron since last week, but we'll fill him in.
No. Okay. With that, I think there's a future agenda items. Any other thoughts for anything in particular? Otherwise, if not now, reach out to myself, Michelle. Kind of already know what we'll be talking about. I think come January and December, we're going to be kind of really focusing in on the strategic plan and some of that development. But to some of the other interests and what Karma was pointing out, we do have this opportunity with Harold. So, yeah, if there's other thoughts or things, just send me a message and we can make sure to get it on the agenda. But absent that, folks, kind of at the end of our list here. If there's nothing else, we can get a motion to adjourn this month's meeting.
I will move to adjourn tonight's meeting.
I will second that motion.
Excellent. I think we do a kind of a.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye and goodbye. Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you all.
Thank